So I haven't seen a lot of Louis Malle's movies. I've seen a couple of narratives from the 1970s, as well as this box set. Eclipse Series 2 by Criterion. And the first documentary is... see if that'll catch. Viva La Tour. It's from 1962. It's about 20 minutes long, and it's covering the Tour de France. And I've never followed the Tour de France, but this documentary makes it seem interesting. It almost makes me want to follow the Tour de France the next time around. Although I don't think it's going to be as... I think it'll be more uptight than it was back then. One of the things that I really liked, I thought it was cool when the racers at one point in the race, they pulled over to raid local bars for alcohol. And I don't think they can do that these days with sponsors. Another thing was a lot of them were urinating off the side of the road, or sometimes on their bicycles, like they were supported by other racers. And I think being televised worldwide, you're not going to see that anymore. One thing I thought was funny was at one point in the race, they were picking up bags of food from their teammates, and they would get bananas, and they would just chuck the banana peels, which I think is ironic because you would worry about a pileup. So the one thing you would think not to throw is a banana peel. There was one pileup in the documentary, and a lot of racers didn't finish at all. They quit from exhaustion. So it made me realize how much just finishing the race at all is impressive. So I thought the music that Louis Malle picked out for the documentary was very, very good for the old France that this kind of symbolizes. It's slow-paced polka. It actually reminded me a lot of my childhood. This might sound weird, but where I live in Virginia, I live very close to Busch Gardens, which is a Europe-themed theme park. And in the France section, they always have that slow polka playing. So that was cool. But anyways, I think with the old France that you see in this documentary, I think the music fits very well. I don't think it would fit very well in a more contemporary or postmodern race. I'm glad Louis Malle made this documentary. It gives you a glimpse of France in the mid-60s, or the mid-century, I should say. So, the next documentary is Umaine Tropumane, which is about an hour and 15 minutes. It's from, 1973. And it's about it's documenting the life of workers in a car factory in France. And the first 15 minutes, there's no narration or talking. And then you're taken to a car show where car manufacturers are displaying shows for potential buyers. And throughout the rest of the film, there's no talking. Criterion has described it as being a meditative watch. However, I think it's more thought-provoking. At some points I was in a trance watching it, but it made me think about, life. As an American under the age of 30, almost nothing I own was made in the United States. So, watching this documentary made me think about these people's lives and where they went when manufacturing went more global. So The third documentary is Place de la République. Place de la République. This is from 1974, and this is 95 minutes long. Again, seeing mid-century life in France was interesting. The characters were diverse, and I liked the character Margot in particular, who was an elderly woman who claims her husband had just died, and she was very flirtatious with the crew. She was saying that she was hustling, which, from what I've gathered from like Midnight Cowboy, means prostituting. I don't know if she was or not. She was kind of showing her leg to the camera, and at one point she flashed her butt. It was in the clothes, but she pulled up her jacket to show her ass. I thought that was funny. There was a young woman, a pretty young woman, wearing a yellow jacket, and at one point they gave the audio recorder off to her so she could interview people on the streets, and she asked everybody about sex. And I thought she was she was a very 60s kind of young woman with her blonde hair, bright yellow jacket. And she asks one woman if she's interested in having a relationship with another woman. So I thought that was kind of cool. The public walking past Louis and his crew, they would often stare at the camera, but they wouldn't do any kind of vulgar gestures to stand out, and be rude. I thought that was interesting. One thing that sucks about being a filmmaker trying to shoot in public is people they'll walk by and stare at you, and sometimes they might flip off the camera or yell at you, things like that. But yeah, nobody really did that. They just kind of stared at the camera. It would be, I don't know if Louis really cared that much. Crowds certainly formed around people while they were being interviewed, so maybe he liked that. One thing that stands out about these documentaries is there isn't a lot of voiceover, which you get in documentaries and a lot of French narrative films. There's voiceover commentary. A lot of older French directors wanted to be kind of philosophical. So I think to hold back a little bit was probably hard for Louis Malle. But it, just went to show you that a lot of the footage really spoke for itself. Another character who stood out in this one was a black man who had mental health issues. He talked about being institutionalized about 5 times, I think it was. He expressed that he had trouble finding work, and Monsieur Malle asked if that was because of racism and discrimination. And the man said that yes, to some extent, but overall he didn't think it was that hard being in Paris as a black man, which is something I've heard before. I've heard that it's easier than a lot of places to be black. The man did seem a little unstable, however, so I don't know exactly how valid his claim that he was discriminated against in the employment process. At one point, he starts crying on camera. But maybe Louis just has that effect on people. This was actually one of the only 2 documentaries in the box set where Louis Malle shows up on screen, and he was a cool guy. He was pretty cool. A lot of the women, you could tell, were very attracted to him. Thought he was sexy, and he was pretty sexy. He had a lot of style, and I think I would like to adopt some of that style for myself. But I think this one is one of the ones I won't rewatch very often. But it was nice. Very unique. So the next documentary is a docu-series called Phantom India. It's long. I mean, on the box set it says it's 363 minutes. There's I think 5 episodes in the Phantom India series, and they're all really cool. These were from 1969. One thing I liked from the earliest episode was this big parade where they had giant monument, kind of like floats that were all made of wood. They had big wooden wheels, and the citizens of the city would push the cart to get it going, and to stop it they had to like throw wooden wedges under the wheels, and it took like maybe 2 blocks for the floats to stop. And I think at one point they pulled down a power line as well. There were hippies, American hippies. There were some other French hippies. A lot of them sleeping in like a field in sleeping bags. But they met these 2 hippies at the Kama Sutra monument. There's like this big stone walls that have carvings from the Kama Sutra in them. And the Indian citizens were a little uneasy by them, which I found that interesting. I've sort of created an idea of what I think India is from watching Satyajit Ray's films. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. It would be embarrassing if I'm not. As well as a couple of YouTube channels that are very popular. Harold Balder and Bald and Bankrupt in particular. And from watching those, I've kind of... it's made me see that India isn't full of vices the way other countries are. And Louis Malle explains that that's left over from the English rule, the Puritanism that you would see in India. And so when they're there at the Kama Sutra monument, they meet these 2 French travelers, and they're young, they're trying to be philosophical and talking about life. And Louis meets one of them later on in another part of the country, and he says that his friend went home. So I thought that was kind of funny, but also understandable, I guess. I mean, I would like to go to India. In another episode, Louis Malle documents this tribal colony, and I've never heard of them before. They couldn't communicate with each other, but it was cool seeing them. They were very friendly. A lot of the Indian people were very friendly to Louis Malle and his crew. Speaking of which, one thing that bothered me as an English-speaking person was that when they would communicate, they would speak in English, but because it's a French docu-series, Louis Malle added a French voiceover in post. And I would have liked to have not had the option at least to not have that. With these documentaries, as I said, a lot of the times the footage speaks for itself, but I really would have liked if some of the little chores and jobs that the Indian people were doing were explained better. Sometimes they would be slapping clothes on a rock, which, okay, maybe they're cleaning their clothes and drying them that way. There's one where these little Indian women are collecting weeds from a very dry field, and they have big sacks full of weeds that they've collected. And there's actually another one where a man is collecting mud, and it reminded me of the serfs from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So I kind of laughed a little in my head, just thinking that they were doing this for no reason. I know they weren't. They had reasons, but that was just something I thought about. I love the architecture, the energy of the cities, and the culture. I thought it was really cool that Louis Malle and his crew were on set during a Bollywood production. I wish he would have met with Satyajit Ray. That would have been really cool. One of the things that sucks is you don't get to see a lot of directors who you love interacting with each other, talking. I want to be a filmmaker, and one of the things that I am jealous of comedians about is that they're constantly with each other in comedy clubs. And from the documentaries, India was pretty dirty, and from the YouTube channels I've mentioned, Bald and Bankrupt and Harold Balder, they're still pretty dirty, and I wish that the Indian government would come up with a better sanitation system, especially before the coronavirus. Although maybe it's not my place to talk about that. So overall, I think this is the one that I would rewatch the most, were these Indian documentaries. The next one, Louis Malle decided that the footage from Calcutta deserved its own feature-length film, which was theatrically released 1969, the same as Phantom India, and it's 99 minutes long. So the Calcutta footage, again, footage speaks for itself. The first 15 minutes are silent. There's interviews with people, but a lot of it is pretty quiet, just watching. And I saw footage from this documentary in Woody Allen's movie Alice from 1990. And Woody Allen's production company found some footage of Mother Teresa helping lepers in Calcutta, and I thought that was from this documentary. So the whole time I was watching it, I was looking for Mother Teresa, and that she never came up. Apparently that was from something else, but there were Mother Teresa's nuns from her nunnery helping lepers, it's very nice. It was also very sad seeing the leper colonies where lepers were only allowed to marry other lepers. Their children don't genetically inherit leprosy, but living with their parents, they are doomed to contract it. Polio was a big thing. You see a lot of people with polio. It was all around sad. There was a little homunculus boy playing a drum, trying to get money, I think. That was the saddest part for me. There was an acrobat making a little kid swing around on a rope for money. There was a wedding, which you see a wedding in the next documentary, and that was pretty cool, watching an Indian wedding. So I mean, yeah, just people were very nice to Louis and his crew, and that was very nice. There was one point where I think a man was holding something up and like blocking the lens of a camera because he may have thought it was bad for people to be filmed. I'm not sure exactly, but the YouTube channels I mentioned, they don't have any videos on Calcutta, so I'm not sure exactly how the state of the city is now. But all around, very good documentary. It's very expository without a lot of explanation. You watch and you see what it was like and what it may still be like in Calcutta. So the next documentary is called God's Country. 1985, when it came out, Louis Malle went to America in the late 70s. He filmed um, a movie called Pretty Baby in New Orleans in the late 70s, and that came out in 1978. In 1979, Louis Malle went to the Midwest into Minnesota to document life in a small town in Minnesota. And uh, the people there were very nice to Louis Malle, although some of them expressed some racism towards black people and to Jewish people. Uh, they've probably never seen a Jewish person where they live. There was a 10-year-old driving a tractor. That was pretty weird. One thing that stood out to me was the lawnmowers. You know, I know not a lot of people at this point watch my videos, but I've expressed uh, my my rage towards lawnmowers. Living in the suburbs, it's very hard to record on the weekends because people are always mowing their lawn. Is but yeah, I don't think it's done as much in other countries as it is in the United States. I found that to be very interesting. Um, the Midwest was very Germanic, and that opened me up to what we think in the United States is a melting pot. It's actually um, very spread out with the cultures. Like the Northeast is very Irish, Jewish, Italian. The South is very black, English, and Scottish. And then the Midwest is very Germanic. Um, their lives were kind of sad. You know, a lot of these people they were baby boomers, which was the first me generation. A lot of them probably had dreams of being sports stars and famous musicians, actresses, and they would get married very young. There was a wedding in this episode, as well as Calcutta, so that was kind of interesting, seeing those two things happen. These people uh, being willing to have their marriage documented by Louis and his crew. So the people were relatively conservative there, and I wondered if they knew who Louis Malle was at all. I think the only time he was recognized in this box set of documentaries was in Place de la République, where one woman recognizes him as a filmmaker. But in 1979, when he recorded these people in the Midwest, I wonder if they had heard of his movie Pretty Baby, which came out a year earlier, where Brooke Shields was 14 years old and she plays a 12-year-old prostitute who falls in love with Keith Carradine. And she gets naked at the time, and I wonder how well this was received by the public, and whether the people in Minnesota knew about that, and how, if they would have agreed to film with him after that. So the last documentary is In the Pursuit of Happiness. This is from 1986. It's 81 minutes long. And Louis Malle interviewed American immigrants, as he himself was now an American immigrant. And watching this movie, it made me think that I wish that resources to immigrate here were more readily available to Mexican citizens. It was sad seeing some of the immigrants, their children kind of rejecting their cultures, becoming more Americanized. You know, I can't imagine being an Indian or Ethiopian person immigrating here, and then your children, they don't speak your native language, and you have a hard time learning English. And yeah, I think that would be very sad. I've never even been to another country, spoken another language, let alone coming here. And it must have been, you know, you saw like a doctor being kind of undermined for his accent. It was inspirational, what a lot of the ambitions that these people had. So this is my favorite Eclipse series box set by far. I wish the documentaries had supplements. I know that doesn't happen with Eclipse box sets, but I would have liked to have seen more of the footage that he got that he didn't include in the documentaries. So that wraps it up. I know that even though I have the Ingmar Bergman box set, technically I have the first Eclipse series box sets from those movies, but I might want to do something with Bergman a little bit later. I kind of want to delve into him all at once. But, I mean, yeah, I've just been getting into Louis Malle, and I've liked him a lot. So, that wraps this up. Thank you for watching, and subscribe to my channel and like this video.